Hello and welcome to another Kaplan Instagram Live. My name's Stuart Pedley-Smith. I'm Kaplan's Head of Learning, and tonight we're going to be talking about the future of assessment. So for those that have not joined us or seen this before, let me just explain a little bit as to how it works. It's a 30-minute conversation with a guest tonight. We've got Shaun Robertson, the Director of Education and Qualifications from ICAEW. And tonight's subject is talking about assessments. So 30 minutes. If you have any questions, please put the questions in the panel and we'll do our best to answer them. So if you're interested in exams, and let's face it, who isn't, then feel free to pop a question in the chat panel. There are three main themes that we try to look at in this sort of COVID period. The first is to talk about what students should be doing in lockdown, how they should be studying. So it's a difficult time for a lot of people, but it does mean that they've got a lot of time. So effectively, what should students be doing in the time they've got available, not wasting it? And the third part is all about positivity. Not in the grand sense of everything will be fine, but more in the sense of what can you be doing in so much that it keeps you on track and covers, I suppose, all the mental health. And once again, if you've watched this before, we've talked about positive thinking, we talked about positive psychology, and we talk about mindfulness. So, as I said, I've got Shaun Robertson from ICAEW joining, so I'm just waiting for Shaun to appear. But let me start with my preamble to this. For a lot of students, obviously, assessments are, I suppose, things to be avoided, or certainly necessary evils, but they are an essential part of professional examinations. So what we need to be able to do is to obviously get students through them as much as possible, but they have been changing and they have been evolving. And what that means is we've seen the advent of and the introduction of objective tests, and we've seen the introductions of case studies. All these things have changed. But ICAEW have got a slightly different approach, and they're talking about bringing in some form of assessment that involves embedding the software actually in the exam itself. I'm just getting Shaun online, so let me just find that. Let me just get him. Any minute now. Shaun, are you there?
Yeah, I'm live.
Thank you. Good. Shaun, I don't know, you may have missed a little bit of that preamble.
No, I heard it all, sure. I heard it all. We just had issues getting me on, but I'm here now. So.
Okay. So, Shaun, first question for you. So I've set the scene a little bit by saying that this is about exams in the sense of embedding software within the system itself. But I thought it might be useful if you could just tell us a little bit, firstly, about the situation with ICAEW and the current situation regarding exams. I know a lot of it's already on the website.
Absolutely, but it's worthwhile just stressing a few points as well of how we are reacting to the circumstances for finding the men. A little bit about me first for finding the men. A little bit about me first of all, just in my introduction said, I'm a member as well, so I went through the pain of passing and qualifying as a chartered accountant. I've taught for these exams, and I've for the last 14 years been looking after the exams on behalf of ICAEW. As everybody who knows me, who's heard me speak, I'm always on the side of the students. I always think that if a student invests time, effort and energy, they should know what the right thing is to do so they give the best chance of passing the exams. I do not mean make the exams easy, because as we know, they're not that easy. But it's making sure that people know what to do to get through the exams. With the situation we find ourselves in at the moment, as people knew, we had to cancel our exams very quickly, which really frustrated quite a lot of people. We had to cancel the June sitting at professional level and move our July advanced level to August. Quite quickly, within the middle of April, we actually managed to get our certificate exams back up and running live online, so you can actually sit your exams at home on your home computer and using cameras from your phone and your PC, actually sit your exam using your own PC. So we got that up and running quite quickly. We were very lucky as we were actually researching that anyway, so it afforded us just to actually roll that out quickly. It's not perfect, so those of you using it at the moment, there is things to be ironed out, but at least it's working at the moment. And the pass rates for the certificate exams are bang in line with what we expect. So it's quite good in a way that the software isn't influencing or affecting the students' performance. They're just carrying on doing the exam. For advanced and professional level, these are slightly different exams because they're session-based, in as much as that it's only one time you sit and do the exam. So if it doesn't work, it's a much riskier strategy. So we've got to put a lot more effort to fine-tuning that particular system. We are researching, so we're working with the regulator and also our supplier to make sure we can get this to happen in August. We don't know if it's going to be a mixture of centres, like proper centre, live centres, or remote invigilation for the exams. We're working on that at the moment, but fingers crossed, we are hoping to run some form of exam from August, and who knows, maybe to the end of the year is going to be impacted some form of remote invigilation, but we're looking at the centre situation as well. I live in London, and it's not just the centre availability, it's also the transport issue as well. So anybody who lives in a large metropolitan area, how are we going to travel? So we are looking to fix this and making sure we can get the exams back online so students' careers aren't stalled in this time.
Yeah, and just to sort of talk about this in the context of obviously the subject for this line, that first part is, what would it have been like, Shaun, had we not got, I always think of the computers, but the technology and the professional body hadn't made the shift towards online assessment, you know, and I know very much the sort of shift from paper-based exams to online assessment was sort of step one, but that you've been looking at a way of changing or using the technology that's available to achieve something that's a longer term ambition around skills. But this sort of first step, I know you're talking about embedded software that will come in the exam. Just tell us a little bit about that, because that's a little bit about the future that's enabled by these technologies, isn't it?
As always, as you said, I mean, our exam is a complete evolutionary experience. Every year we sit back and think, what can we do to make this exam? And for the students listening out there, it's not make the exam harder, it's make the exam more relevant for your career, for your job as such. I say, I go back to my time, I passed a lot of exams in my time through having a good memory, and that didn't make me a good chemist or accountant. We want to make sure that you're getting the skills to your job. So we've been at this long journey. So we've got the exams on computer. Thankfully, we did that in the last few years, and it was always the way of just getting the exams on computer without affecting the integrity of the exam. So not letting technology wag the education dog, if that makes sense. Focusing on our academic credentials. The next phase has been, as you mentioned there, actually embedding software into the exam. So what that means is, at the moment, the exam is, there's a scenario, you play a role in the exam, and there's a problem and you fix it, which is still very stylized, isn't it? It's very much like an academic process. So we thought, what would happen if we tried to bring in more real life? So what we're doing from March 21 onwards is embedding data analytics software from Inflow, where the students will actually go in and actually analyze real live data, or as real as we can make it in an exam situation, and they can interrogate the data and manipulate it as if they were at work. So they'll actually, you go to the actual app or application or software program in the exam and do it live, and then they'll come back and tell us what they found in the exam.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's strange, isn't it? Like you think back in your own sort of learner journey, it can sound a little bit scary, the idea of doing it, but you know, you were talking about sort of memorizing things, spending hours and hours of sort of memorizing content, which has a discipline, but it's not really very useful. It's just about the students adapting to what the exam is going to be, isn't it? And if it's going to have an embedded piece of software, students need to practice using that software.
Absolutely. Just practicing the software is very intuitive. I mean, we got a long way since the blue screen of Microsoft in the sort of 90s. So it tells you pretty much press this button, press that button, and you actually can analyze and interrogate the software. And it is an exam, so we're not going to hide something so you can't find it. It's still an exam situation, and we'll give lots of practice software to tutors, to students. Employers are asking to see it as well. Even universities are going to look at our software as well to see how we can actually make this work and actually enhance the skills of the students.
Yeah, and like you say, professional employers have had to work hard in the past to try to create, and case studies have been, I suppose, an example of that. But even the mini scenario, and we go back, we can go back quite a way with examples. Yeah. But you know, where you almost have to create the scenario in order to test the skill. What the software does is it just puts you straight into the environment without having to say, you know, you are an accountant working in this company. It immediately gets to see whether people can do it. Yeah, definitely. So I get that. I think that's really quite interesting, and it's a development. It's like all these things. Once you computerize something, once you move a step forward, you don't always see it at the time, but it opens up a whole new set of a potential set of new direction. Yeah. But I know that this, and you've already mentioned the idea of the technology wagging the dog. That's not what this is. And so why is this so important? So this isn't just about, hey, guess what? We need, accountants to be able to use embedded audit software. There's something more educationally profound that's sitting behind this, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if any of my team are watching, and I know some of the names popped up there, they would all put their hand up and say, we wish we hadn't gone down this particular route, because this isn't easy for us, integrating software upon software, the exam being reliant on the internet. So this is not a vanity project for us. This is done through quite intensive research with academics, but also with employers and students. So I was at Student Council just last week talking to students about this, getting everybody's point of view about what can we best do to enhance the learning experience and the assessment experience to make it more relevant. So we do a lot of research to ensure this is a viable way forward. Personally, I think it's a case of our industry catching up, as I mentioned, and making sure that computers is second nature now, and it will just get more and more and more intense. And so we've got to ensure that our students, people who qualify, can actually use computers, know their limitations, know the weaknesses, but also know the strengths as well. So it only makes sense we actually look at assessing in that particular environment. But it's only the start. For 2021, it's like a soft launch. We're actually trying to make sure we get inflow into the exam, make sure it works. Once we know it's working and it's actually a viable way of actually assessing students, we can make inflow more, bigger impact on the exam. We can look at potentially all that data analysis. Is it relevant for things like the business strategy and technology exam? Could you actually see trends in sales, for example, which is going to impact on your business strategy of how you actually look at marketing or even stock control or whatever. So it could be used in wider applications. But then when you think wider, and this is the sort of 2023, 4, 5 vision, is that if we can get inflow into the exams and that software works, why can't we look at other software that an accountant would use? I mean, as an accountant out there, who would actually do a VAT return or an income tax computation using pen and paper? I know we all do sometimes, but on the whole, big, huge organisations, it's done by a computer. So surely making sure that students have got the skill where they actually interrogate a tax programme and pull out that data. And then we can check it much more, the skills that are more relevant, like reasonableness. So when you pull off your VAT return, actually, is the figures you get told there, are they reasonable or are they way out of sync with what's actually going on in the business? That's an important skill to make sure that what you're going to do with that once you've got it out, which return do you use? And then we can look at things like accounting software as well. At the moment, we have a trial balance and you do your draft accounts. Why don't we have actually extracting the information from an accounting software? And those of you who've done that, and I've done that, it's nowhere near as easy as it sounds like. There's always some balancing figure that's bigger than everything else. to actually look at that live and actually see how you would take that raw data from an accounting package and start turning it into a set of draft accounts and all the issues around that as well. So it allows us then to have much more skills-based exams where you're looking at focusing on what you do with the output from a particular program, but never forgetting you've got to have the fundamentals in place. So taking a big step back, that's the future. Our bottom 6 exams, the certificate exams, absolutely still always be the fundamentals, the nuts and bolts, to make sure that all our professionals can do the fundamentals of accountancy, like basic double entry. They've got to know how to do that to understand the output from these particular packages. So we're not losing the fundamentals, we're just enhancing the skills that you'd use as fundamentals with.
Yeah, that's just there's quite a, just unpicking some of that, Shaun. One thing that would be interesting, you said that you'd spoke widely to students and employers about this. I'm just curious, what did students really say? Because I remember seeing a survey many years ago that actually sort of said, you know, that we want to make some changes to the examination to potentially to sort of, I suppose, really make it in some people's minds a little bit easier. Maybe sitting 3 papers was no longer, you didn't have to do them all together. You could sit 2 papers, 1 paper on its own. And the survey came back and it said something like, it was absolutely clear, should we be able to, should it be compulsory that you sit all 3, and if you fail one, you fail them all? 99.9% of members said, yes, that's exactly how it should be. And 99.9% of students said, no, we like it like that. So I was just curious, what did the students say about embedding the software? Were they open to it? Did they say, hey, great, look, I'm going to go for a job with a qualification. I'm asked for these type of skills. It's great. Or did they go, bit unsure about that? What was the...
Being honest, and so I can...
Yeah, there's nobody else listening, Shaun. It's all right.
Yeah. I mean, I was an ICAEW student, and I know as a group, we hunt as herds. We don't like change. So if the tutor or the professional body wanted to change things, we always said, absolutely not, it's fine as it is. So I get that mentality. But that's all going back to what I said at the very, very start. If things have changed, as long as we actually manage to change and bring it in properly, give people practice, and actually bring everybody on that journey, it's not a scary thing to be done. So I can understand the resistance. And there was a bit of, when you actually just talked about it, like how we're talking, there was a bit of resistance from the student population. However, we do make sure we test these new initiatives in detail. So last summer, it feels a lot more than last year, but last summer, on a Saturday, we got 20 odd students into a room in Euston and actually talked them through what we're doing with the software, gave them some tutorial on how to use the software. Then we let them do an exam. So these are students who had just passed. It was a corporate reporting exam, if I remember properly. And then actually asked them, can you sit down and do an exam again? One of the amazing thing that I had, because we're all this is never going to work. When they started doing the exam, I was in the room with them. It went very quiet and it was very industrious, and people tapping away on the computer and so on. And at the end of it, unanimously, all the students came out and said it was much better experience. They were saying things like, there's no end of things we could be saying in the exam. The exam feels much more real. It felt like being at work. It was a much more positive experience. There was one student, I don't want to mention her name, but she was like our biggest ambassador. You should do this now. This is the best thing ever. This is much better than rote learning answers for a pre-programmed script. Actually doing this, it was an overwhelming positive experience that the students came back with.
And I think you've touched on it there, Shaun, as well, really. It's this idea that, and it happens at every stage of a change in the exam process, doesn't it? You know, if you've studied change the syllabus, but it doesn't matter. This is an evolution, and if you don't make the changes and you don't keep the exam relevant, then it may initially people may feel comfortable about it because it's the same as it was. But, once again, we've seen a number of changes. It seems inconceivable. It's all right at the right time, isn't it? But as I say, if exams on computers, people didn't like that. I can't type as fast as I can write. I don't think like that. But, just think where everything would be now. We wouldn't be able to embed the software. We wouldn't be able to be doing all these other things and move the exam along. So I think it's interesting for students to. I can fully understand why people would find it difficult, but a professional body has a much broader stakeholder group. They've got to keep the exam relevant, and in the long term, it's going to be good for employability, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's got to make sure that these are the skills you're going to be using in the workplace. I mean, I challenge any student or anybody out there listening into us, the other two people. It's like, when does your client come to you when you sit there in front of them with a nice A4 piece of paper with the story typed to you and said, like, Mrs. Jones did this and Mr. Jones did that, and you ask the question. Usually when I went to clients, or even now when I do some work with charities, you go in there and they don't even know how to ask you a question or tell you what their issue is. They just know that something's not right. So enhancing those skills of analysis, interpretation, skepticism has got to be the way forward, because that's the skills you need in the workplace. And be a professional.
So if I'm interpreting what you're saying, Shaun, the shift, the technology is the enabler, but the underpinning principle is that knowing stuff isn't arguably as important as it used to be, and that's because Google is here, or any other knowledge-based system. People can, and I know we've had this for a long time, but open book exams were always in principle a good idea. They why you could probably have said to previous sort of members saying, do you know what, they're allowed to take the books into the exam now. But that's not what we're trying to test. We're not trying to test what's in the book. We're trying to lift that knowledge base, aren't we? And that skill set, and the technology is enabling us to do that.
It's actually about the knowledge you've got to have. As I mentioned, the fundamentals are still in the qualification. It'll still be there. But it's what you do with that knowledge, how you actually use it in a scenario, apply it to a particular problem, solve the solution, give your client options. That's the skills we're looking for. And if you just sit there and learn IFRS 17 or whatever, and just learn that by rote, that's never going to help you dealing with a problem or a client, because it's half the problem, as I just alluded to there 2 minutes ago, was trying to understand what the problem is before you actually, and then when you actually need it, you realise it is IFRS 17, then you can pick it off the shelf and apply it. But then the skill set of understanding, interpreting a problem, and being able to know that's the tool that you need to go and find to solve it is fundamental to not just accountancy as a professional, but all the professionals, isn't it? It's understanding the client's problems, doctors, dentists, and so on, so they can actually put a solution in place that hopefully works. So you call it employability skills. It's also future-proofing your career as well, because this is not going to go away. This is not going to be a one-hit wonder. Oh, data analysis will go away. We'll stop doing it in 2022. We'll get something else. It'll just become part of the normal toolbox that accountants use. So if you haven't done your data analysis, your detailed in-depth analytical review, why not? I mean, this has become the norm in a way. So I guess our responsibility to make sure that our qualified professionals actually have those skills.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, fourth industrial revolution, everybody's been, remember these things, remember Brexit, remember robotics, they don't exist anymore, everything's cozy. But, the fourth industrial revolution and the idea that, a lot of finance skills, I've got friends that still think accountancy is about adding things up on calculators, but I don't know, it's a big part of that. But the idea that as the processes become more automated, the skill set has got to rise. Anyway, hasn't it? And I know that you guys have looked into that as the profession has. It's a protective nature, but it's also a realization that finance professionals are needed and they have a role to play, but it ain't going to be what they were doing 10 years ago or 15.
Absolutely. And for anybody who was listening out there, our chartered accountants don't just add up numbers. I mean, I think they're more like GPs for the business world. You go in there and you listen to the finance director, the financial controller, whatever they're called, problems, and you work out what the problem is. Because like they go to the doctor as well, sometimes what the problem they're telling you isn't the one they actually want to tell you about. You've got to try and dig that out of them, and then trying to come up with a viable solution that's going to be easy for them to implement, to fix. And those skills have been in place for a long time. But I think, going back to what I said at the very start, being transparent, honest, and saying to students, like, you don't have to learn the pro forma for a consolidation. That's a commodity nowadays. But do you understand why you're using that pro forma? Do you understand the implications of consolidating a permanent establishment from another country? What the risks are involved in that has surely got to be what we use going forward.
I don't know whether you say that, Shaun, but somebody put GPs for the business world. I think you've been. We could have a meme going there. And one thing that I just want to pick up on, and I think, and we've spoken about this before, this very fine balance between the fundamentals, because what you're talking about today, i.e. a piece of embedded software, that's the way things are at this point. But when things go wrong, or when new things come along, and we've got qualified accountants who are 10 years past qualifying in 2021,
yeah,
they're going to have to go back to those basics, aren't they, and unpick the new world, so to speak, whatever that new challenge is in the workplace, knowing what how the audit software worked in 2021, as important as that was then. So it is not going to solve this problem that they're facing, and this idea of keeping the fundamentals absolutely rock solid, so that people can think double entry, even though the technology has took us in a completely different direction.
Absolutely right. I think it'll become even more important that if you're getting information coming out of a system very quickly presented to you, you're going to be so agile, be able to think through double entry really quick in your head to actually do that skepticism aspect. Is this right, what's coming out?
Yeah.
Because rather than go away, I'll have to think about this and do your T accounts, you're going to have to just instantly be able to understand, interpret, does that make sense? You have a turnover of 10,000, your tax bill's 1.2 billion, you've instantly got to know something's wrong there. Well, and hopefully everybody realises there's something wrong if that's the case. But it's amazing. I still do a little bit of work for a charity nearby, and people still put single entries through and stuff like that. I think, why did you do that? And you've got to be, I think, as I get older, you realise that all these fundamentals of like debit and credit, so your credit income, where does the debit go? That's got to be fundamental before you do any of the big fancy stuff. It's so important. Actually, that in itself is an enabler for the fancy stuff. Without the fundamentals, you're never going to be able to understand the fancy stuff. So
yeah, that's another good. The fundamentals allow you to be able to understand the fancy stuff, and the fancy stuff will just continue to change, won't it?
Yeah, and also as well, it'll move as well, because that fancy stuff of today will become the norm of tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, it's like calculators in the 70s, isn't it? They were the devil's incarnate. People are going to forget how to use numbers.
Yes.
It's unthinkable now to actually work or do anything with numbers without a calculator. But I can remember my grandparents and great-grandparents going like, it'll ruin your brain. You should be able to do this in your head.
I know. It's only when you've been through enough change that you realise the humour that sits in the way things exist at the moment. Shaun, just to summarise that, and time is going to bear of us, but there's a point in there that now these exams are online, there are other things that can be done. Tax software could be embedded, and it has perhaps great application for case studies and virtual environments, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, I think that's the enabler to get towards enhancing and assessing skills and skepticism and ethics, is putting the student more and more into scenarios that they're reacting to in an exam, and who knows in the future. Don't get panicked about this, but you could be getting live emails during an exam to respond to that things have changed, or we've just bought this subsidiary, react to that. That's not happening anytime soon, but But that's your life, isn't it?
Yeah. I did notice that you put the changes so far ahead. 23, 24, 25. So it's the future. Look, Shaun, we are really running, and I need to end. We've had a question just pop up there, which is quite good. For a future student, what are your main advices? I'm going to ask you if you can leave the audience with a couple of top tips or a couple of thoughtful ideas. What would they be? What this new idea? This new
Absolutely.
world?
Two thoughts, and to address that question as well, what advice would I give to a student? First of all, we've got students to remember, we need you to pass and qualify. That's what we're here as a professional body. We're on your side. We want you to pass. The easiest way to do that is making sure that you realise that the learning process that you go through, whether it be in college or in the workplace, all that experience is critical. And make sure you can see how it's all linked. Don't focus on the exam. Make sure you can use the software. But it's actually the learning that's key. It's there for a reason. It's been well planned by yourselves and us to make sure you've actually learning the appropriate stuff. So learning is important. Don't focus on the IT equipment. Secondly, when you actually go to the exam hall, make sure that you've practiced, especially at the moment where we've got quick fixes in for the exams. Make sure you look at the software, practice it. Don't take a flyer on the day because the setup for remote invigilation, so make sure you practice that so you're ready for it and abide by the rules. But you'll be fine. But go to our website, it's all there. Ask us any questions. We're completely transparent. We want you to pass.
Thank you, Shaun. And that is an absolutely super point to end. Time has beaten us. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure people who didn't think assessments were going to be interested have found it absolutely fascinating.
It's my life.
Our life. As Shaun said, if you're looking for the update on the Exams ICAEW website, a recording of this will be posted on the Kaplan website, and I guess will be circulated for ICAEW as well. Thank you all for listening. And next week we'll be traveling all the way to Malaysia. So join us then for Instagram Live. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
All right.